God. That's cold now. Oh well. I'm filling everything on my iPhone, and I think that's fine because, like, who gives a shit? But sometimes it's weird. 2024, I read 38 books. Yay. That was not my goal. I think my goal was like 50. Not even close. And even though I didn't hit my goal, I'm still pretty stoked about that number. I feel like 38 is still a lot of books. I don't know what the national average is for reading books. Maybe it's this. I don't know. I don't know what it is. But like, I feel like 38 is still a lot. And to be fair, I reread a lot of my books. And I like rereading them, so that's not going to stop either. Although I think this next coming year, I'm not going to count them because I'm trying to go through all of those. I'll count them in the overall count, but I'm trying to hit 52 new books, ideally, fingers crossed. So out of those 38 books though, I still have like a top 5. I feel like everyone has a top 5. There are books that you remember that you love the most. I think last year was a good year because I read some of my favorite books of all time, I feel like, last year. I will caveat that I do not rate books. I don't know why. I mean, I used to rate books, but like, I find it very inconsistent, and the reason why something is really good in this book doesn't mean it translates to the next book. I used to do it by like how much I learned, but sometimes just reading fiction is just fun. And maybe I learned something, but maybe that wasn't like the thing. We're gonna get into them, and maybe they're the same as some of yours, maybe they're different. The whole point is to like just share. The first book I want to talk about is Kim Jiyoung, born 1982, by Cho Nam-Joo. Now, the problem, I own this book. I don't know where the hell it is. I swear I saw it the other day on the counter and it's not there. I don't know where it is, so I'll insert like a graphic here. Here? No, here. Yeah, because I just don't know where it is. So this book essentially follows Kim Ji-young, born 1982, and follows her throughout her adolescence, her young adulthood, and her full adulthood, or motherhood too, as well. The book looks at the systematic ways the patriarchal Korean society kind of force women into like this trap of wanting to work and have it all, but also being constrained by societal expectations of women, and specifically young women. I think the main point of the book is to kind of look at like an average Korean woman, like a woman who lives in a family where the boys are coveted, who are taken care of, and how it's not really discussed or talked about beyond that. One thing I really liked about this book is Cho cites like her sources essentially. So there's like footnotes throughout the book, throughout the narrative, which I thought was, I'm sure other novels have done that, I'm sure they have, but I thought it was just so well placed and well done. And especially as an American, I am Korean American, but I would not consider myself like Korean. I don't know much about Korean society or culture outside of like what my family has shared or what I know about Korean American traditions and values. So I learned a lot from this book, and she's supposed to be born 1982. What's the math on that? 13 years older than me. I'm 29. 42? Yeah, she's 42. So very squarely millennial if we're thinking about it in American terms. I don't know if like that translates to like Korea or Asia. The point is to look at an average woman's experiences and like how like the society and the patriarchal norms like have failed her. One of the reasons I really like this book is not only for the cited sources, but how applicable I felt it to the US culture. Don't get me wrong, this is definitely a book that is talking about the Korean patriarchal culture and their society, but I found it very relatable to the US about how women are like trapped. It is different, but there was that aspect I really enjoyed. Another thing is I know that even though it's a translated text, I can tell that Cho writes with such like not just clarity, I don't want to say simplicity. It is not a simple text, but she writes it almost so effortlessly that even though she's talking about these complicated, complex like structures, she's able to tell it so well and clearly. It was very fast paced in my opinion. It actually got me out of my reading slump that I had last year. So shouts out, love. I'm putting that at number 5. Again, like I feel like the ranking is kind of hard, but I think I just enjoyed it, but it didn't curve out the other. I don't think, I mean, that it is just number 5. Just deal with it. It's 5. Number 4. Okay, the rest of the books I actually found. So number 4 is Hotel World by Ali Smith. This is the first Ali Smith text I've read. I've been wanting to read Ali Smith, and this book has convinced me that I want to read everything Ali Smith has written. I'm gonna read the back of it just because like I feel like it succinctly tells us what it's about versus like me just explaining it. 5 people, 4 are living, 3 are strangers, 2 are sisters, 1 a teenage hotel chambermaid has fallen to her death in a dumbwaiter. But her spirit lingers in the world, straining to recall things she never knew. And one night, all 5 women find themselves in a smooth, plush Evrons of the global hotel, where the intersections of their very different fates make for this playful, defiant, and richly innovative novel. If that didn't convince you, I don't think I can, you know? I think one of the number 1 reasons I really liked this book is because it does one of my favorite things whenever I read literature, and something I'm always looking for is this idea where there are all these characters and they intersect for like a moment in time and then they diverge again, but they're like impacted by each other somehow. And this is essentially that book. I thought it was beautifully written and thoughtful. I think the 5 women that we see are all very interesting. Starting with the death of the young girl who falls, the chambermaid who falls, is a very interesting way to start. Also because like I don't want to give it away, but she's young. I mean, it says it that she dies in the dumbwaiter and her soul lingers, and it's this meditation on like what happens to us after we die, and it's like in the immediate aftermath of it all, if that makes sense. I also think this was a very timely book. Earlier last year, my grandmother passed away, and I began reading this right around like a week or 2 after she had gone. So that idea and that meditation of like what happens to us when we die, I think this is the reason this book also ranks really high is because it's like I think I would have liked it whenever I read it, but I think I read it at the right time. You know how like when there's a book and you could tell it's good, but it's not the moment for it? Like this was the right time, right book. And I loved it. Next is book number 4, Maggie O'Farrell's The Marriage Portrait. Okay, so Maggie O'Farrell is one of my favorite writers. Granted, like she has several books. I've only read 2, this and Hamnet. Hamnet is top 3 of my favorite books of all time. I'm planning on doing a video on it because I love it that much and I just want to talk about it. I feel like no one talks about it. Maybe I'm not in the right circles, but like I feel like we should be talking about that book more. But this is The Marriage Portrait, and I'm not going to go into like, I'm not going to read the back necessarily, but essentially we follow Lucrezia, who is the 3rd daughter of a Grand Duke in Italy, and it's the 1500s. Eventually it becomes very clear to her that her husband is going to murder her. She is 16 years old, and this book does another thing that I love in writing where we jump back and forth in time. So we start when she's about to get married, and then we go back in time and we go back and forth, and it's I use this kind of phrase a lot when I'm talking about books, especially books I like, because they have this thing, but it's a book that unwraps itself to the reader. And I thought it was so beautiful. It was a little slow at certain parts, but I was able to push through. It wasn't like a bad slowness. If you haven't read Maggie O'Farrell, she writes detail so well. It is a vibrant text. And I know if you're not like a historical fiction person and the 1500s Italy kind of like threw you, I promise it doesn't read like what you think it reads like. It reads very contemporary. You forget it's the 1550s. I actually am planning on writing an essay on this book, and I want to submit it to some journals, so I'm going to keep most of my thoughts to myself for now. But once I've finished writing that essay, I will want to share it. It's one of those books that I feel like is very applicable today. It's like, it's one of the things where it's like, what does reading old literature or old books teach us about like life now? And even though this is set in the 1500s, I found it very, very relevant, and this is beautiful. I think if you haven't read Maggie O'Farrell, if you're going to choose between this and Hamnet, they're kind of two different things. If you care about Shakespeare at all, read Hamnet. I think that'd be better. But if you haven't, and I think this one, The Marriage Portrait, might be a better idea. It really, especially if you're a person who likes detail and you like when authors really play with language. I mean, all authors play with language, but you know what? I think you'll know what I mean when you start reading this. Read this. So these last two, I didn't know what to put number one because they're both number one in my heart. I love them both so much that choosing which is, they're both first. I'm just going to present them though in the order that I read them. So I'm going to, this is the first one I read, and I read this like in March, April time, and it is Convergence of Desire by Felicity Nivan. Okay, I think in my last video I said this, but if you haven't watched that video, then you don't know this. I love historical romance. I love romance reading, but specifically historical romance genre. I don't do a lot with contemporary. I am going to try to read some contemporary romance, but something about it is just very off-putting to me. I only read historical romance, and one day I'll dissect that. But this is everything I want in a romance novel. Every romance novel I've read since I read this, I compare to this book. Similarly to The Marriage Portrait, I do have an essay idea on this. This was a TikTok recommendation from, oh my god, I can't remember their name, but I'll post it here. And I'm so glad I listened to that person. Shout out to TikTok book recommendations. Not always, sometimes you guys lag, but this one was it. I'll read the back. The little like caveat at the top, like they usually, if you don't read romance, they usually do like a two-liner that kind of encompasses it. And this says, an insatiable rake falls for an eccentric genius. Too bad she's his innocent bride, and he vowed to never touch her. Love, 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 love. This is a marriage of convenience trope. This is also one of my favorite tropes. I love a marriage of convenience, along with the in and one bed shit, you know? I love that. If you think you don't like historical romance, read this. Read this. I think she might have it. I think she might have them on Kindle Unlimited. You might have to buy this one. I love her. I think I read like literally, I read all of her other novels that have been published, and I think Felicity Nivan is a wonderful historical romance writer. I don't like when historical romance, I mean most romance, when they're like really like clean cut and they're like just the perfect person. That's not as fun. Something I will say is, although it would be anachronistic to say that our main character Harry is autistic, she is definitely neurodivergent, and that comes across in the text. It's just like a very unique romance, and I loved it. And also it's a romance that, like, though obviously romance has sex scenes, like that's one of the things we like enjoy reading about them, the intimate scenes here were actually so beautifully written. And there weren't a lot, because like a lot of the book is about Thomas trying to gain Harry's trust, or build that sense of foundation in a relationship. It was just beautiful. This is like this, I said, this is in my top 3 for sure, for forever. Okay, my last one, Agnes Grey by Charlotte, my last one is say it, oh my god, Agnes Grey by Anne Bronte. This is it. This is the book. This book is so freaking good. Okay, first of all, Anne, I'm sorry. The literary world has done you dirty. They always, the forgotten sister, la la la. Yeah, no, fuck that. She freaking ate with this. This was so good. The general synopsis, it's a very simple story. It is a point of view from Agnes Grey's perspective, who is a young woman whose family becomes destitute, and she needs to go work, and it becomes a governess. It's really one of the only jobs you can do at this time period. and she has all these grand ideals, and as she goes into these spaces to be a governess, she kind of like fails, and she fails a lot, and it's different than she thought, and she romanticized it a lot, and I love this. Now, I I try to look up actually some articles on this book, and there are a few, not a ton, because everyone always wants to focus on fucking Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre, and like, listen, I get it, but no one focusing on this. Okay, my girl Agnes, I love this book. This book is so good. She's funny as hell, and to be fair, that might be an anachronistic reading, right? Like, I don't know if it was meant to be funny, but I think it is. Like, there are some hilarious one-liners. It's very quick. It's a very quick read. I think this is actually a really good one. Like, if you're someone who wants to get into classics, but you don't really know, this is this one. If any of you are teachers, you should read this one. Teachers to young kids. Oh my God, I found it so relatable. It was so funny and so good. I think another surprising thing about this is she sneaks a little romance in there. And you know, this was generally written in, what year was this written? 1800? I don't know. Anyways, the only article I read was like shitting on this book a lot. And like, to be fair, their argument was true. They were talking about this long word type of novel where like the point of that is to like kind of like give your audience like a lesson, like a growth kind of thing. And the argument that they were making is like, Agnes doesn't grow, and she doesn't grow into impart a moralistic stance on the reader. I think she does grow, but I think it's different. I do think it's different, and this is definitely anachronistic and like my rethinking of it. The reason I picked it up, crazy enough, is the cover. I thought it was beautiful. It's a signature classic by Union. What is it? Union Square and Co. Beautiful choice. One out to you. You made me buy it. And I loved it. I mean, now I'm an Anne Bronte stan. I'm reading. She only wrote one other thing, and I know I'm not buying books this year, but that's going to be on my wish list. I want that book, and I might even go to the library to read it because, oh my God, do you think the library will have it? They really don't fuck with her. I don't get it. I actually don't get it. All right, so that was my top 5 of 2024. Solid year in my opinion. I loved it. Please let me know if you want any deeper dives on any of them. I do want to do that, at least for sure, for the Marriage Portrait and Convergence of Desire at some point. That one I also have I think I said that, but I have an essay idea for that. So after those are written, don't want to give all my ideas away, you know. Although no one's watching this, but still, you know, you never know. Okay, bye. Oh fuck.